All right, so you've been digging deep into this blockchain world. Sent over a pretty eclectic mix of sources, I see. Built-in, Stanford Online, even Geeks for Geeks, and Black Duck. You're not messing around.
Well, I have to say the variety is impressive.
Yeah, seems like you're ready to move past that whole blockchain equals Bitcoin thing and see where else this tech can go.
Absolutely.
Which is perfect, because that's exactly what we're going to do today. No need to rehash the absolute basics, I think. We'll assume everyone's got a general idea of what we're talking about here.
Sounds good.
But let's talk about how this whole chain of blocks thing actually works. Is that Google spreadsheet analogy still a good way to picture it, or is there a better way to wrap our heads around it, I mean?
The spreadsheet analogy is definitely a solid starting point.
Yeah.
It helps grasp that concept of a distributed ledger, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine this spreadsheet, but it's like copied across tons of computers, all constantly syncing up. Each block in the chain, that's like a new line in the spreadsheet, recording, a bunch of transactions.
Okay, I'm kind of seeing it.
But the real magic, the thing that makes it truly unique, is the cryptography baked into the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Cryptography. Got to have that. So each block is like cryptographically linked to the one before it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Forming this chain that's unbelievably tough to mess with, to tamper with.
Okay, I'm picturing this like tamper-proof digital chain. Got it.
Yeah.
But then there are all these different ways to verify and add those blocks to it, right?
Right.
I keep hearing terms like proof of work and proof of stake, but honestly, they kind of blur together in my mind. What's the actual difference there?
That's a really key distinction. It gets to the heart of how different blockchains actually function,
Yeah, lay it on me.
So proof of work, or POW, that was the original method, the one Bitcoin made famous.
Classic.
Think of it as a massive decentralized computational race, right?
Okay.
So you have all these miners, and they're competing to solve these crazy complex math puzzles, and the winner gets to add the next block to the chain.
And they get a reward too, don't they?
Right. They're rewarded with, you guessed it, cryptocurrency. But this whole process, it's super energy intensive, which is a big ongoing debate, of course.
So that's where that whole energy debate comes in. All right, so then what about proof of stake? Is that basically just a more eco-friendly version of the same idea?
It's a bit more than just that. POS is a whole different approach to consensus. Instead of miners racing to solve these puzzles, in proof of stake, you have validators. They're chosen to add blocks based on how much cryptocurrency they're willing to stake, to lock up, basically.
So it's like putting your money where your mouth is.
Exactly. That staked cryptocurrency, it acts as a kind of collateral.
And make sure everyone plays fair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If a validator tries to cheat the system, they risk losing their stake. Big incentive to stay honest.
That's actually pretty clever. So no more crazy energy-guzzling calculations. You're just using financial incentive to keep things secure.
It's a big shift.
Yeah. So is proof of stake winning then? Like, is that becoming the dominant thing?
It's definitely gaining traction. It's seen as more scalable, more energy efficient. A lot of newer blockchains are built using POS right from the start.
Makes sense.
And even Ethereum, the second biggest blockchain out there, they're transitioning to POS as we speak.
Wow. Okay, so these mechanisms really shape the character of a blockchain, huh? Like what it's good at, what its weaknesses are.
Definitely. They're fundamental.
But you know what really got me thinking when I was going through these sources? It's the sheer variety of applications for this tech. Like, we're so used to hearing about cryptocurrency, but it goes way beyond that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
These sources, they're talking about everything from tracking coffee beans to managing digital identities. Like, are we really at the point where blockchain is popping up everywhere?
I'd say we're past the popping up stage, honestly.
Whoa.
Blockchain is actively being woven into all sorts of different sectors. Take supply chain management, for example. Think about it. You could track a shipment of, well, anything, really, from where it's made to when it arrives at your doorstep.
And all of that's recorded on a blockchain.
Every step of the way, securely and transparently. This could revolutionize industries where knowing the origin and authenticity of a product is crucial.
Like food, right?
Yeah.
Or medicine.
Exactly. Pharmaceuticals, luxury goods, you name it. No more fake designer handbags, no more questionable ingredients sneaking into the supply chain.
I'm already sold. Okay, what about healthcare? Putting medical records on a blockchain sounds like, I don't know, maybe a privacy nightmare. Or is it the opposite?
It's actually being presented as a solution to a lot of the privacy and security issues that plague our current healthcare systems.
Really?
Think about it. Your medical records stored securely on a blockchain, and you control who gets to see them. No more messy paper trails, no more worrying about data breaches.
Right, when you put it that
It
out.
could streamline data sharing between doctors, empower patients to actually own their health data. It could even help with medical research while keeping everyone anonymous.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense, especially with all the data breaches we hear about these days. One other thing I saw that caught my eye was Microsoft, I think it was. They were looking into blockchain for digital identities. Is
Yes.
that like the key to finally taking control over online data?
It's a fascinating concept, isn't it? Imagine you'd have this single, secure, verifiable digital ID. You control it and you use it for everything. Banking, voting, accessing government services, whatever.
Wow.
Streamline processes, reduce fraud, people actually owning their data in a digital world. It's powerful stuff.
It really feels like the possibilities are endless. Copyright protection for artists, secure voting, even applications in government. I mean, are we talking about a genuine revolution here, or is there a risk we're getting a little carried away with what blockchain can actually do?
It's important to be realistic, of course. Blockchain isn't some magical cure-all, but I do think it's a powerful tool with the potential to disrupt and reshape tons of industries. But we can't forget that it has limitations, too. We need to understand those if we really want to use this technology effectively.
Right, right. So amazing potential, but it's not all sunshine and roses, right? The sources did mention some pretty big challenges, like scalability. Can blockchain really handle the sheer volume of transactions happening in today's world?
That's a big one. Scalability is a major hurdle, especially for those big public blockchains like Bitcoin. Processing tons of transactions quickly and efficiently, that's still a challenge.
So are people working on that?
Oh, yeah. There are all sorts of solutions being explored, like layer 2 scaling and sharding, but they come with their own complexities.
Ah, so there's no easy fix.
Not yet, at least.
But then there's the energy question. Like, is it ethical to use so much energy, especially with climate change and everything?
It's a valid concern, no doubt about it. The energy consumption of those proof-of-work blockchains, it's something we have to take seriously. But, as we talked about, things are changing. The shift towards proof-of-stake is helping, and more mining operations are using renewable energy sources, too.
Okay, so there's hope.
There's definitely progress. But the environmental impact of blockchain, it's something we need to keep an eye on as the tech keeps developing.
It feels like we're standing on the edge of something huge here. So much potential, but so much to figure out still. Where do we even go from here? I feel like a little blockchain history lesson might be helpful.
Absolutely. Understanding how blockchain evolved can give us some valuable perspective because this isn't just some recent fad,
Oh.
It's got a much longer history than most people realize. The roots go way back.
Let's go back in time then.
Welcome back to the deep dive. It's funny. We always hear about blockchain being this super secure, unhackable system.
Yeah, that's the reputation, right?
But is it really the whole story? Like, are there cracks in that armor?
I'm curious about that too. Because the sources mentioned something called a 51% attack. And honestly, that sounds a little terrifying.
It's a pretty dramatic name, for sure.
Is that a real threat or more of a what-if scenario? Like something that could theoretically happen but probably never will?
It's both, really. A 51% attack, it's a real threat, but the likelihood of it happening, well, that depends. The basic idea is that if someone or some group manages to control more than half of a blockchain's computing power, well, then they could theoretically mess with the whole system.
So like a hostile takeover.
Kind of. They could double spend coins, reverse transactions, even block new transactions from going through.
So basically hijack the entire thing. That doesn't sound very unhackable to me.
It's a serious concern, but the thing is, actually pulling off a 51% attack, it's not easy. The bigger and more spread out a blockchain is, the harder and more expensive it gets to gain that much control. For something like Bitcoin, with all its miners all over the world, you'd need a ridiculous amount of computing power.
So the sheer size of the network is kind of a built-in defense.
It's a huge deterrent, yeah. But it's not just about size. The technology itself is designed to be tamper-resistant.
Right, right. So how does that work? Like what actually makes the blockchain so hard to mess with?
Well, one of the key features is immutability, meaning that once a transaction is recorded on the blockchain, changing it is practically impossible. Every block is linked to the one before it using cryptography, so it's like a tamper-evident chain of records, like a digital ledger where every entry is set in stone.
Okay, so we have this immutable ledger spread across this huge network protected by complex math. Seems pretty solid. But the sources also mention something called the Byzantine generals problem. Now that sounds like something out of a history book, not a computer science textbook. What does that even have to do with blockchain?
The Byzantine generals problem is actually a classic thought experiment in computer science. It's about the challenges of getting a bunch of different parties to agree on something to reach consensus when you can't be sure if everyone is being honest.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Imagine a group of generals. They're planning an attack on a city. But some of them, they might be traitors, sending false messages to sabotage the plan. How do they make sure everyone's on the same page when they can't fully trust each other?
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So how does blockchain solve that problem?
Blockchain solves it through those ingenious consensus mechanisms we were talking about earlier, like proof of work, all that puzzle solving. It's not just about brute force computing. It's a way to weed out bad actors and make sure only valid transactions get added to the chain, even if some parts of the network are compromised.
This is like a built-in lie detector test for the whole system.
Kinda, yeah. It's not just about the code itself, it's about the game theory behind it, the economic incentives that keep everyone honest.
I'm starting to see why people get so excited about this stuff. It's more than just tech. It's a whole new way of thinking.
Exactly.
But even with all these safeguards, are there any new security threats on the horizon? Technology is always evolving, and I imagine hackers are constantly trying to find new ways to break things.
You're absolutely right. As blockchain gets more sophisticated and more widely used, new vulnerabilities are bound to pop up. One area of concern is the security of smart contracts.
Oh yeah, smart contracts. Those were mentioned a lot of the sources.
They're basically self-executing contracts powered by code. But that code, it can be complex and hard to audit. Even a tiny error could have huge consequences.
So it's like any other software,
Yeah.
right? Human error, bugs, those can always sneak in.
Exactly. And as we start relying more and more on smart contracts for important things, financial transactions, supply chains, even legal agreements, making sure they're secure becomes critical.
No pressure coders. Another potential threat I keep hearing about is quantum computing. Could those super powerful computers one day crack the codes that protect blockchain?
Quantum computing is a game changer, no doubt, and it does pose a potential threat to cryptography as we know it. It's still early days, but there's concern that quantum computers could eventually break the algorithms that keep blockchains secure.
So is this an existential threat to blockchain, or are there ways to fight back?
The good news is, the blockchain community is aware of the quantum threat. There's a lot of research happening right now into quantum-resistant cryptography. The goal is to develop new algorithms that can withstand even the most powerful quantum computers.
So like a technological arms race, constantly trying to stay one step ahead.
That's a great way to put it. It's a constant back and forth, which is part of what makes the blockchain world so dynamic. The need to constantly adapt and evolve, that's key to its long-term survival.
Well, it seems like blockchain security is a pretty complex and ever-changing landscape. But let's switch gears a bit and talk about another hot topic, the environmental impact. We touched on the energy consumption of proof of work, but can we put some numbers on that? Like how much energy are we really talking about?
The energy consumption of those proof-of-work blockchains, especially Bitcoin, it's been a big point of contention. Some estimates say Bitcoin mining uses as much electricity as entire countries, but those numbers, they can be misleading. Well, first of all, we need to compare those numbers to other industries. Think about the traditional financial system. All those data centers, all that infrastructure, that uses a ton of energy too. And don't forget about things like gold mining, which has a massive environmental impact.
So it's not fair to just point the finger at blockchain.
Exactly. It's all about perspective. And the energy consumption of proof of work, it's not a fixed number either. It goes up and down depending on the price of cryptocurrency, how difficult it is to mine, even how efficient the mining hardware is.
So those attention-grabbing headlines, they don't always tell the whole story.
Exactly. We need to look beyond the hype and dig into the details. And most importantly, we need to talk about the efforts being made to make blockchain more sustainable.
Well, you mentioned the shift to proof of stake, which seems promising. Are there other positive developments in the works?
Absolutely. For one thing, there's growing interest in using renewable energy for mining. Some mining farms are already powered by solar, wind, hydroelectricity.
Well, that's great.
Not only does that reduce the carbon footprint, it also makes mining more economically viable in the long run. And the innovation doesn't stop there.
There's more?
We're seeing big improvements in mining hardware, new chips that are way more energy efficient, and some researchers are even working on entirely new blockchain designs that are inherently more sustainable.
Wow. So it's a multi-pronged attack on the problem.
Exactly. Lots of different angles. But there's another piece of the puzzle that could play a big role here: regulation. What if governments stepped in and incentivized or even mandated greener solutions?
That's a good question. And that brings us to another big topic, the evolving world of blockchain regulation. It seems like governments everywhere are starting to realize they can't just ignore this technology anymore.
It's too big, too disruptive. It's changing the financial world, creating new possibilities, and raising tons of questions about oversight and control.
Yeah, the sources mentioned some interesting things happening. The UK is looking at ways to protect stablecoin holders, and China is developing its own digital currency.
It's a complex landscape, with different countries taking different approaches, but one thing's for sure: blockchain is shaking things up.
It sounds like we're entering a whole new era of blockchain regulation, but it's still very much a work in progress.
Definitely. Governments are walking a tightrope. They want to encourage innovation, but also manage the risks. It's about finding that sweet spot where they can support responsible development while protecting people and keeping the financial system stable.
The FTX collapse definitely showed us what can happen when things go wrong in the crypto world.
It was a major wake-up call, no doubt about it. It shook people's confidence and highlighted the need for stronger regulations, better investor protections, and ways to prevent that kind of thing from happening again.
It feels like a turning point. The future of blockchain might depend on finding the right balance between innovation and regulation. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think it's time to dig into the history of blockchain. You mentioned it's got a longer past than most people realize. So where do we begin? Welcome back to the deep dive.
You know, as we wrap up our exploration of blockchain, I think it's time to kind of zoom out a little. We've been in the weeds talking about the tech, the challenges, all that. But what does it all actually mean?
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the details.
Right. Like, where does blockchain fit into the bigger picture? What's the big takeaway here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've seen glimpses of what this technology can do: revolutionize supply chains, empower artists, create new forms of digital identity. It's pretty mind-blowing.
Totally. But I get the feeling we're just scratching the surface.
I think you're right. It's like we're standing at the edge of this vast, uncharted territory. We know there's something big out there, but we're still trying to figure out what it all means. Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about it. Blockchain isn't just a technology. It's like this catalyst for change.
I like that, a catalyst.
It's making us rethink some really fundamental stuff: how we interact with data, how we build trust, even how we organize ourselves as a society.
Big questions.
Big questions. And our sources hinted at some of the ways things might change, but I'm curious to hear your take. Like, what do you see as the most profound implications of blockchain in the years to come? What's going to blow our minds?
Well, one of the biggest shifts I see is in how we think about data. Blockchain has the potential to create a much more equitable and transparent data ecosystem. Imagine a world where individuals actually have control over their own data.
Okay, that sounds amazing. But is it realistic? Like right now, it feels like all our data is controlled by these giant tech companies.
It's a tough battle, no doubt. But blockchain gives us new tools to fight with. It lets us create these decentralized systems where data isn't controlled by any one entity, but is spread out across a whole network.
So it's harder to manipulate.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that shift in power, it has implications way beyond just data. It could transform entire industries: finance, healthcare, government, you name it.
The sources talked about blockchain being used to create more transparency and accountability, like tracking the origins of our food or making sure elections are fair.
Right. And those are just a few examples. As the technology gets better and more people start using it, who knows what we'll be able to do? We might see entirely new industries popping up that we haven't even thought of yet.
It's exciting, but also a little scary, right?
It's both. Like any powerful tool, we have to be careful how we use it. We need to make sure blockchain is used for good, not for bad.
One of the concerns I've heard is that blockchain could actually make inequality worse, that it could create this digital divide between the people who have access to this technology and those who don't.
That's a valid concern for sure. We have to make sure blockchain isn't just a toy for the wealthy. It needs to be accessible to everyone, no matter who they are or where they live.
So we need education, infrastructure, all of that. We need to make sure everyone has the opportunity to be a part of this blockchain-powered future.
Exactly. It's about building a more inclusive digital world, a world where blockchain empowers people, not leaves them behind.
Well, this conversation has given me a lot to think about. It's clear that blockchain isn't just about the technology itself, but about the choices we make, how we use it, and what kind of future we want to create.
We're at a crossroads, that's for sure. Blockchain offers incredible opportunities, but also potential dangers. We need to be smart about how we move forward.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final question to ponder. How do you see blockchain shaping your world? What excites you, what worries you, and what role do you want to play in this unfolding story?
The future of blockchain is being written right now, and each of us has a part in that story. Whether you're a developer, an entrepreneur, or just someone who's curious about this technology, your choices matter.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of blockchain. We hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the complexity, the potential, and the impact of this truly transformative technology.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep pushing the boundaries. The future of blockchain is in our hands.